So it's great today to be speaking with Will Golder, director at RaceNation. Will, how are you doing?
Hi, Gary. How you doing? Good to meet you.
Yeah, things well at this end. Has it been a fun time, I'm guessing, recently?
Yeah, things certainly are well. We've as is everyone, and as has everyone, been through a certainly a different and a strange few months since the whole industry went into lockdown. The whole UK, the whole market,
Yeah,
especially been on the event side of the fence with charities too. It's been an interesting few months, but we've done a lot. We've taken a lot of decisions, and really to try and help the industry, made a lot of improvements and partnerships, which has kept us exceptionally busy. The team's done a great job, all
yeah,
working from home and different aspects, and starting to come back to the office now. But yeah, it's been an actual quite a busy few months from the initial outlook when this all happened, and you thought, what's going to happen?
mm,
I think we've done things that we would have never been able to do in a normal day to day with of normality, based on us having a bit of breathing time to think, take stock, look at what the industry needs, and try and help.
yeah. No, fascinating. So we'll talk about the new developments in a minute, because I think that's certainly something that we really want to get into. But maybe it'd be really
Sure.
helpful. Tell us a little bit about your backgrounds. The bobsleigh thing just sounds really cool and fun. So if we talk a bit about obviously your time doing bobsleigh and how
Yeah.
you came to Race Nation, and obviously it looks like you had a very interesting journey.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I'll keep it as short and interesting as I can. Essentially, as a youngster, was an athlete with Great Britain Bobsleigh. I did 8 years full time with Great Britain, going through the whole full time athlete experience, training full time out of in Bath, where British Bobsleigh is based. And I guess the number one question is, how did I get into that? Firstly, I was a sprinter. So classic cool runnings, Jamaican bobsleigh. I grew up in Jersey,
All right.
and in Jersey there was a Lieutenant Governor, Sir Andrew Ridgway, who, when he was in the army, he was in charge of army bobsleigh. He came over to Jersey to represent the Queen there, and decided to continue his roots of supporting bobsleigh and GB bobsleigh. Anyway, I was a sprinter. I could run reasonably quick, but I was also quite tall. I was 6'2", and he saw me as a bit of a potential for a bobsleigh athlete. Long story short, I progressed through to some trials, and ended up going to university, essentially to get a degree in sport and business, but
Mhm.
also to be able to train full time. It was there that I then joined Great Britain, and got my first seasons under my belt with Great Britain, and I did 8 years full time, essentially being UK sport funded, lottery funded, to go through to 2014 and 2018 Olympics was the plan. Unfortunately, just prior to the 2014 games, I ended up getting a stress fracture in my heel a couple of weeks before the games, and that just threw a massive spanner in the works of everything that I wanted to achieve for 2014. Which also then led to a couple more injuries that just kept coming back, and it got to the point I was 26. In 2015, January, decided to retire at that point, and look for a real job, as they say, and that's really led me down to going back to Jersey, back to my roots where I grew up. And again, Jersey being a little village really rather than an island, is all massively finance backed and business based, and so I went back there as a sportsman, being quite different. Obviously, I had a bit of a reputation in Jersey as the athlete, or one of the athletes from Jersey, and there've been some phenomenal athletes coming from there. But it was like, what do I do next? And again, keeping this as short, as interesting as I can for you, it was there that I stumbled across Race Nation. Was in its pure infancy at that point.
Okay.
Two founders of Race Nation were actually working for Jersey Zoo at the time within their fundraising arm, as part of the charity, putting on events. And what they realised by trying to put on events, one of which called the Durrell Dash, which with Gerald Durrell, Jersey Zoo, all connects in. They realised that they needed online entry because they grew the event from 50 people to a few hundred. Spreadsheets and paper just wasn't working. So they needed online entry, but they also needed online fundraising. And so there was loads of providers of online entry. There was a few providers of online fundraising, but there was nothing really integrated that worked for them. They were also very technical. Andrew and Rob, both very technically able people. Rob being what ended up being our founding CTO, said, look, there's nothing out there that has online entry with fully integrated fundraising. So as we've got all these people signing up to events, we want to automatically create fundraising pages for the charity or charities, what it could be. And so again, they then went off and said, there's nothing out there, let's go and build it. So RaceNation was founded 2014. I retired early 2015, stumbled across RaceNation to Andrew, who said, hey, aren't you that bobsleigh guy that's just about to retire? I hadn't actually just decided to retire at that point. I'd only told a few friends and family. So again, classic Jersey, found out before I did, actually. But I said, look, yeah, I am potentially going to retire. And he said, great, well, if you do, come and have a chat. This is RaceNation. He explained the founding aspects of RaceNation by trying to provide a service to the event and charity world. And it sounded quite good. So again, I went away and looked it up, looked at the potential of the market, saw so many events, saw so many charities that needed this support. And so I ended up getting back in touch with Andrew and saying, hey, do you remember me? I'm that bobsleigh guy that you said was going to retire. And I did. Any chance of a job? And he said, I'm glad you said that. We need somebody to come in and start introducing us with a bit of a sporty background, but also that gets it. And as I said, my degree was in sport and business. My A-levels were in and around maths, computing, and sport. So again, I got the tech side, I got the business and the sports side, and so it just felt right. Roll on that to joining RaceNation, became part of their new business team, helped to grow it. I then came over to the UK. Again, we looked after all the events in Jersey, started looking after all the charities, and it really showed there's a massive potential for this business, but also a massive need for this from an event and charity point of view. I moved to the UK and opened up our office here in Brighton, at the Sussex Innovation Centre in Brighton. And we really set out to not only to showcase what we did in Jersey as from a support point of view, and then go on to help grow into the UK market. Very quickly, we gained some traction here, working with some massive charities, big events. We've now worked with over 2,000 events across the UK. We've helped raise millions of pounds for charity, and had hundreds of thousands of people book through this fully integrated process. Myself and my journey, again, progressed on that. I progressed through the ranks within the new business team, became the head of sales from there, to the point then helping the business raise investment and raise some significant investment from some investors.
So when was the funding round? That was quite an interesting milestone for the company, wasn't it? I would call that, yeah. So was that a few?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we've been through a few phases of funding rounds, and really my role started off just by explaining the tech and the business to potential investors, because that's what I knew. But then very quickly, the investors realized that they wanted me kind of spearheading this company. And again, I progressed through to become a director where I am today. The funding rounds came off the back of multiple. We had some very early stage seed investment that came out of Jersey from what we call a bit of a friends and family round. We then went through various phases of some of the EIS and SEIS schemes available for UK investment, until more recent rounds. I'd say bigger rounds started in 2017, really, and we've just had a few rounds since then.
Would those be similar sort of private investor rounds? Would that be the kind of thing that you do, or you more like the crowd-cube type routes?
Yeah. No, all been private investment, and from that side, we haven't done any crowdfunding or that side at this stage. And I think you probably won't see us doing it. You see some great success stories from the crowd funding side of things. But for us, we've been very lucky to have a very close-knit, knowledgeable and able set of investors that have been able to provide the investment, but also provide some of the wisdom and knowledge to help guide us as a business, guide myself as a young professional, coming into now leading quite a big business from 5 years ago, being a bobsleigh athlete sliding down some ice, with a few degrees and that side behind me. So our investors provided not only obviously cash investment into the company, but also the guidance along that, to now support myself and our business in what we're doing.
No, absolutely fascinating. And also, you guys have been really busy recently. So you mentioned at the beginning, you've had a lot of new initiatives that you've been working on. I think the event business, RaceNation Events, is one that is particularly interesting. So we're going to talk a bit about that.
Sure.
Maybe, if you could kind of just outline some of these new developments you've been working on, around the virtual racing and as well with the event business, RaceNation Events, how that came about.
Of course. Yeah, I'd say from, as I mentioned, we were founded from event and charity side of the fence, where we wanted to help. And coming into a period of lockdown, of COVID, of significant restrictions, events were the first to go. And they're probably, and we're starting to see a few more now, but they were looking like going to be one of the last to come back. And so we had to look at our industry, and I just took a bit of time to kind of evaluate what was needed. And it was clear that event organizers found themselves in quite an unprecedented position, where they, of course, were used to a few refund requests or some deferrals, but they were not used to it on such a mass scale, mass cancellation, every single event being cancelled. Entrants wanting refunds, deferrals, needing to understand what their rights and responsibilities were as event organizers. And so we set out to really try and help. And from that, I decided to keep all staff. We'd actually just hired 2 more developers into our tech team, and that was in February. Coming into March, we decided to keep them fully employed, but also all our staff fully employed, and the whole team fully in post rather than furloughing, because we decided that it was a bit of our duty to try and help our organizers get through this stage and use our technology to their best advantage, really. So all our staff were there to help. And then I looked at some of our features. We had to use the time of events not taking place. We went off and polished what needed polishing. We built some new features into the platform. We integrated into a few different aspects, like findarace.com. For example, event organizers love and need to be able to showcase their event to more people. We are a technology company that do a great job in entry and fundraising. Findarace is great at exposing and giving a marketing aspect, a marketing arm to that. So it made sense for us to integrate with them, where all our events, we would actually did a deal with Findarace where they could appear on Findarace free of charge, to try and help, where we would cover that cost, in them using our system. We worked with the National Running Show. Again, they have 25,000 people that attend their show, looking to book and not only find new trainers, new kit and new tech, but also be able to book their seasons of events. And so what we did is we created something called the Events Village at the National Running Show, so that any event in the whole of the UK can appear there free of charge. Because again, we understand that events aren't necessarily going to have the spare cash to be able to pay for a booth or a space at the show, but actually for us to be able to fund that and put on every event in the UK, can showcase their event there to the 25,000 people. Again, hopefully it would show that we were trying to help and support these organisers in coming back in 2021. All of this came about. We then needed and looked at the likes from refunds and protections. And we implemented 2 services with event cancellation protection for event organisers if they want it. So we did it completely at cost price, but we enable event organisers to integrate or enable an event cancellation policy. So again, we realised from putting out a big industry survey that a lot of entrants were going to start looking quite closely at what organisers would be putting on with regards to protections. So again, event cancellation made sense for us to integrate, and then also a refund protection from an entrant point of view. There's a lot of entrants that get injured, military, jury, pregnancy, a whole host of different reasons why they can't take part in the event. And event organizers incur costs immediately as you book. So event organizers are inclined to defer an entry or to allow for a transfer into next year, but don't necessarily always provide refunds. So this refund protection for again, a set of rules and covered within a policy allowed an entrant to be able to take out for a few pounds a policy that if they did get injured, if they did go on jury, military, pregnancy, as I said, and a much wider variation than just that, they would be able to get a full refund. So again, we just thought that was an important aspect for the future of our market, and we saw a big step change in that. And I guess the final aspect to that of us looking to support came right back to event organizers themselves. And I was talking to a few of our organizers who said, look, well, we've cancelled our events for this year or postponed them into next year. We have deferred lots of entrants, but we're not actually sure whether we can come back, because again, we all start to realize that it costs thousands of pounds to put on even a medium-sized event of a few thousand people. The cost of putting that on is massive, and a lot of these events simply could not afford to come back next year. So again, I went away. I had a bit of thinking time. I had a chat with some people quite close to me from a RaceNation point of view, and I came up with a bit of a concept of RaceNation Events. And the concept really was back to its simplicities, that it was designed to help support event organizers in their events that may not be able to come back next year by providing the event organizers themselves a wage and a salary, and to be able to put the events on. Again, quite rare for them. Normally, as self-employed, they'll be the ones that pay themselves last. So again, a bit of comfort for them and their families that they're now getting paid, but also a bit of cash flow underwriting to be able to say, look, we, based on a clear set of essentially an algorithm that we run over the events to see if it's genuinely viable. If the event's viable, we will look to support that event so that it can take place next year. Because not only for event organizers was it important that they still had a job and could do what they love, but also from an entrant point of view, from a charity point of view, from a stakeholder point of view, and a community point of view. All of those four aspects were desperate for events to take place next year, because entrants had paid for a place that they may not have. We solved that by RaceNation Events coming in, taking over some of these events, but honoring all of the past entrants. At no point did we want any entrant to miss out on a place. So if they had paid for a booking, even though it's with a different company now, we will honor that place into next year for the same event. The charities are massive. We've all seen the headlines of how impacted the charities have been and how devastating it's been for some of these charities. Because of our integrations, because we're fully charity compliant with gift aid and all of that, it made sense. We absolutely needed to support the charity sector too. So again, all of the events raise money for charities, and that was a no-brainer. And then, as I said,
sorry to interrupt. Just with RaceNation Events, so you tied up with Immortal Sport. Are there more than one event therefore in the pipeline in terms of event businesses? Is that the way that you see that? Sorry to interrupt there.
Absolutely, no, that's all right. Absolutely. So in answer to that question on Immortal Sport, we initially started with Immortal. We brought on 12 of their events that they had initially, because those were the events that immediately needed saving. We have conversations going with a lot more events and a lot of different organizers that have said, hey, look, we actually just need a little bit of support. We're absolutely, we're not looking to take over these events and the organizers then don't do anything. What we want to do is the same organizers, the same teams, the same volunteers, the same suppliers, all still put on those events. They just come into our family. We provide a little bit of central management to be able to save a bit of time and cost from that side by pulling it all together. And we support these organizers to still put on their same events. We're not looking at turning up on anyone's doorstep and spinning up new events. The idea is that RaceNation Events supports organizers that need that support into next year.
So it could be a full acquisition, switches, or wherever you've managed the transaction, or you could be taking a smaller equity stake. Is it so it's fairly flexible in the way that you structure it?
Completely on a case-by-case basis.
Right.
Depending on what the organizer needs, we can look and help. From an Immortal Sport point of view, absolutely. The Jodie and Lucy, two directors at Immortal, were integral to the founding partnership of RaceNation Events, because they're the event organizing experts. They're the experts in facilitating, putting on events. Myself, RaceNation Technology, can absolutely support from a technology point of view, from a business structure point of view. But it was absolutely, Immortal Sport, Jodie and Lucy were integral to RaceNation Events founding, because they could put on events, and the initial 12 events that we brought in. We then will absolutely look, and we are in discussions and having conversations with a few other organizers since the launch of this, that have said to us that this is a great idea. Can you support us as well? And some of them may bring their events and be part of the full event RaceNation Events family. Others might just need a bit of support going into next year, of which we will look at trying to help them as well.
Yeah. So I suppose the question that quite a few people might be asking is, how deep are your pockets? Because clearly there are a lot of events out there. Is it something that clearly there's a finite amount that you can do, but it'd be interesting to sort of get your perspectives on that, I suppose.
Yeah, and I guess the answer to that right now is based on opportunities that present themselves, or support needed for the industry. We will always look to try and help and support. That doesn't mean to say we're going to be able to help and support everyone. There's a number of steps that we have to go through. One is ourselves, certainly Jodie and Lucy as directors as well at RaceNation Events, becoming comfortable that the event is viable. At that point, we will look to try and support as much as we can, and as long as we can. And I think looking at it from a viable point of view, that becomes quite clear for us to then be able to talk to our investors, or talk to different lines of credit, to be able to say, look, this again is saving our industry with a bigger picture, long-term future. We're absolutely not doing this for a quick win for a year and then cancelling everything. It's with a view of growing the RaceNation brand, and really looking to help and support the industry. So in answer to your question, there is no finite restrictions on this. It's on a complete case-by-case basis, that if an event needs support, I will do my best to try and find that support, even if I can't right now.
Yeah. I suppose so. The way that you're investing or you're engaging within those businesses can be providing your services, providing, as you say, a bit of IT and a sort of infrastructure support, as well as a bit more of cash support. So as you say, it's kind of fluid, and it's based on that viability and the due diligence that obviously you go through.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly that. The professional aspect from Jodie and Lucy as event professionals, we may have events, clubs, associations that have an annual event that the committee can no longer afford the time, or they've lost a few committee members that can't put the event on. So there might just be an aspect of outsourced professional services from Jodie and Lucy's point of view, from an event directing point of view, or it might be the full host saying, this is our event, we've got 10 events, we need a bit of cash flow support. Myself as a race director want a wage, and we work that out. We say, okay, your events are viable. You as an event director want a modest wage. There's the wage, there's a bit of cash flow support, but also there's a profit share in all of this as it goes. So it's very, very fluid in how it can work. It's completely case-by-case basis, but absolutely designed to try and help.
Oh, fascinating. I could talk forever about this. I'm conscious of your time as much as anything. So maybe as a kind of final question, and I'm sure there's going to be some positivity in your answer, but I'll ask it anyway, around your thoughts for the long-term prospects for this industry, because we all know, it's been decimated. And you mentioned the National Running Show, which is in January 21. That at the moment, may still have question marks on it because of gathering, restrictions. And I suppose that those spring events that we have, in the early part of next year, again, may still have question marks. But I suppose, the key question is your thoughts around the long-term viability of the wider endurance sports category, because one thing we've definitely seen is that everything is interlinked, from whether it's sponsorship, coaching, obviously athlete paydays, through all of it, service providers such as yourselves. It's also interlinked. So to get your view about whether we can weather this storm and come back stronger or not would be really interesting.
Yeah, it's $1 million question, but at the same time, I don't think I would have ventured into RaceNation Events, or we would have ventured into RaceNation Events, unless we had true belief in it. Separately, as I mentioned, part of RaceNation, we built a full virtual event feature, virtual results, and virtual aspects through our app and tracking. Now, I think virtual events has played a part, and again, we ran an industry survey that showed that I think it was just over 50% of entrants took part in a virtual event during lockdown, of which we saw some really amazing virtual events take place. And so I think virtual events have a part to play in this. But again, I think it was only just over 10% of respondents said that they would look to do virtual events in the future if physical events were back. So I would say there's absolute appetite from entrants to take place in events. We're seeing events take place now under some COVID secure guidelines, which have been great. And again, seeing those come back has been great to see, really, because we've got new runners, new entrants, charities now receiving some money, all right now, even though we're still in a period of restriction. So I would say massively positive going into next year. I would say that there's event organizers doing a great job now, so it can only get better. Obviously completely dependent on how the UK weathers the storm over the next few months going into some winter periods. But again, seeing virtual events also having such a positive impact on the industry today, should also help weather that storm, I think, going into when we can bring bigger events back into next year. And some of those virtual events are actually remaining a part of the portfolio. The Superhero Series is a great event, all inclusive disability event in London. But they this year put on a virtual event to be able to support all those people that their event could not take place. But we'll keep that event as part of their portfolio to next year, because there's people all over the world that would love to be part of that event. And even in the UK that unfortunately couldn't necessarily travel to the venue. And so seeing stories like that and virtual events having an aspect and remaining part of that portfolio, again, was an important reason why we built those features, but also why we can be positive about events now. And then next year, I think it's a given that events will come back. When, how much, where is a big question, but we're seeing it now, and events are getting more and more confident in COVID secure measures, and I think the communities are becoming more and more confident in COVID secure measures. So as long as we all remain living by the rules as part of our track and tracing, our distancing at the events, then events shouldn't be impacted too much. It may be a case that if those COVID secure measures are breached, then it will spoil it for everyone. But so far, event organizers are doing a cracking job, and you can see it already. Some amazing events taking place.
No, definitely. The only way is up, I think, is the.
Let's hope so. Yeah,
definitely. It's been absolutely fantastic. I really appreciate your time. I love what you guys are doing, and look forward to seeing more from both your event side and obviously the other aspects of what you're doing. So, thanks again, Greg. And take care of yourself, and catch up again soon.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much.
Cheers.